Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing a weekly meta breakdown for the historic best of one format. If you're looking for historic best of three, explore, standard, whatever it may be, check out the video playlist. What we do here on the channel is look through a bunch of stats each week to see what is the best performing deck on the MTG Arena ladder, upwards to Mythic rank. Where we get the data from is UntapGG, which you see on the screen. It's a companion tool that tracks win rate data for users. It could track your own win rates, but it aggregates and does like deck collection, syncs, whole bunch of useful stuff. Link is in the video description if you want to get started with it today. And we also, I will post all these deck lists in the video description with timestamps, so you can just pull whatever list you want, paste it into Arena, and have a great time. So as I mentioned, this is a best of one video. Again, if you're looking for best three, this is kind of our first deep dive look with a bunch of stats for the new cards from Shadows over Innistrad Remastered, as well as the original Innistrad set. If you're looking for even stuff, I did a couple videos ahead of the qualifier weekend. So if you're looking for Explorer, especially for the weekend, it's already in the channel. Check it out and kind of go from there. So we are looking March 21st through the 29th. Platinum to Mythic rank, 58,000 games of Magic played. And we'll dive into it. I just want to say a special thanks. We hit 8,000 subs on the channel. I appreciate all the support. We are still trying to go to 10,000 by June. So if you haven't subbed, hit that sub button. It's free, easy, helps with the channel, as well as likes and comments are always greatly appreciated. So we're going to jump in and kind of a surprise blast from the past deck that hasn't showed up in quite a few weeks, but maybe making a resurgence is Mono Green Elves. As you can see by the lack of cards that I own for this deck, I have never played Historic Elves. It's not a deck that interests me. It is a very powerful deck. It's a very linear deck. It is a deck that cries if your opponent plays any 3 or 4 mana sweeper, but it is very explosive and can kind of kill out of nowhere. The core of the deck is you're trying to play a bunch of mana accelerants. So you have things like Elvish Mystic, Jaspera Sentinel, Llanowar Elves. You also have Circle the Dream Druids, as well as Elvish Archdruid that generates huge amounts of mana. With that mana, what you're trying to do is create a very wide board and play a lot of Lord-style effects. Impervious Perfect gives you a Lord effect. The Elvish Archdruid is a Lord effect. The Leafground Visionary is a Lord effect. The Elvish War Master, well, you guessed it. It's a way to kind of buff your or make you a lot of tokens. Dwindling Elites got a bunch of it makes 2 bodies in 1, and kind of the core of the deck with Collected Company. Make a wide board, generate a lot of mana, pump said mana into either your Elvish War Master or your Allosaur Shepherd and make very large creatures that attack your opponent, smash them in the face, and kill them. The Visionary also lets you draw cards, so it's kind of an added card advantage engine. This version of the deck is also playing Freyalise Skyshroud Partisan, lets you tap on tap, seek an elf for card advantage, and lets you potentially generate a Regal Force, which lets you draw cards equal to the number of green creatures you control. Collected Company Shell helps you find all your creatures, and then your top end effect is Craterhoof Behemoth. So sometimes these lists play ways to tutor Fierce Empath, stuff like that. Sometimes you just naturally draw into it, but this is kind of another top end finisher of the deck. Mana base very clean here. 16 Forest, 4 Castles. The castles play really nice because it gets you with 5 lands to 6 mana, which is key for activating Allosaur Shepherd. If you want to kind of enhance this mana base a little bit more, I'd play 1 to 2 potential Lair of the Hydras, and then a Boseiju as well in the mana base. Moving on, we go to Boros Affinity. I don't know why. Weird. Being a little particular. This was showing 67%, but when we jump in, it dropped to 62%. But in any case, Elves is still above 60% win rate. We then go to Boros Affinity. This deck's largely unchanged, and there's kind of 2 flavors of the artifact decks, and we'll cover them back to back here. This one is at 66%. So what we have here with Aluris Companion, you're playing a bunch of cheap artifacts, and the core of these decks, both the Esper and the Boros version, is built around Retrofitter Foundry. So for 1 mana, you can tap on tap. For 1 mana, it's basically a bunch of like keyword soups. But the big thing is you're using the last ability, Sacrifice a Thopter, create 4/4 colorless artifact. And what you're able to do is on turn 1, play Retrofitter Foundry with Ornithopter. You also make Thopters with Barb Spike as well as Yotai, so just cheap ways of turning these Thopters into 4/4s. In the late game, you can pump in mana to just make a bunch of tokens and stuff like that. You have tax effects in Esper Sentinel, removal and portable hole, lifelink and trample with Shadow Sphere. Toolcraft becomes a 3/2 first striker when in combat. Barb Spike just gives a buff, but you're really using it for 2 artifacts in 1. Ingenious Smith helps you find artifacts and gets bigger with additional artifacts that you cast. Mashiko has a big buff, and then Yotai's removal, Thopter, and a buff. You also have things like Darksteel Citadel, which you could also animate with the Yotai. So there's that version of the deck, and then there's the Esper version. So there's a lot of similarities: the Foundries, Portable Holes, Ornithopters, Esper Sentinels, Mashikos, Ingenious Smith. But this version is also playing Hope of Girapur, another Thopter that can kind of stop your opponent from sweeping or kind of comboing off. You use Ensoul Artifact in this deck that can enchant a artifact and make its base power 5/5. You can also do that on the indestructible lands and just smash your opponent in the face. This version is also playing Innovative Meta Tech. So 2 mana, 1/3. When an artifact creature 1 or more deals damage, you get to draw. Or you get to seek a card. So notably, seek, not draw. So you're always kind of guaranteeing gas. And then you have Vault Scourge, which you're never casting it with black mana in this deck. It's always 1+2 life, but it's a life linker that can get bigger, especially with things like Ensoul and Mashiko to help swing the races. Then go to another deck that's been picking up popularity, Selesnya Hammer, 64% win rate. This version here, I believe this is Delmo, another content creator, but we got the printing of Sigarda's Aid that lets you flash in equipment and then auto-equip it when it enters the battlefield to a creature you control. You have a combination of the Hammer, Colossal Hammer, so it's a 1 mana plus 10/10, but it usually costs 8 to equip. You can bypass that and just kind of cheat it into play. Equip the creature. You also have Belt of Giant Strength, which is very similar. It gives base power 10/10, and then its ability to equip normally costs X less from 10, where X is the creature's power. So if you already have something hooked up to the hammer, you can basically equip it for free. Another way to kind of get around the equipped cost is Kemba's Outfitter, which basically switches the equipped cost to 1, either an equipment on the battlefield or in your hand. You also have Kemba Ka Enduring that lets you have a cat get equipped with it. The rest of the deck, you have Thopters to hold the swords, Ginger Brutes for unblockable, Mana Tide for counter, Portable Holes removal, these Selfless Savior for protection, along with some copies of Skrelv, Shadow Sphere for lifelink and trample, Springleaf Drum for ramp, and then a couple Blink Moth Nexus as another kind of creature land with evasion. We then move to Boros Burn. So this is 58% win rate. So an aggressively slanted burn deck. I played a lot of this deck. It's fun. The kind of swap that I made in my version is I'm playing Melt Through over Play with Fire. Most of the time, you've seen a lot of the metas creature-based. Melt Through leaves the damage on your opponent's creature. Can still go face, but the damage perpetually stays on it. So it lets you, like for example, over 2 turns kill a Shieldred, where this would have a hard time doing that. This gives you the upside of scrying if you go face, but again, it's kind of, more often than not, my cheap burn is usually dealing with the creatures early. This is Eidolon of the Great Revel matchup, or deck, so you can kind of, it is symmetrical, so it hurts you as well. But the way you could kind of offset that is with things like Lightning Helix. You have Dragon Rage Chandler, that's an evasive body, and then you have card advantage in the form of Light Up the Stage. It is a Luris Companion, so you can buy back your stuff, including Kumano. And then you have Skewer the Critics for burn, Static Discharge, just a whole bunch of burn spells. Risk Factor, usually suggest if you can, keep this to later in the game where you kind of force your opponent into like a really awkward spot. It lets you either draw 3 or deal 4 to them, which is usually a big chunk of damage, especially with like Eidolons. And does have the Jumpstart ability, so it is something early you can flip over with Dragon Rage Chandler to get Delirium going and then cast it from your graveyard afterwards. We move from there to Rakdos Midrange. Okay, so all the percentages are off out of order today. I don't know what's up. We went in order from like the actual percentages showing, but it's drunk. So 61%. So the order, these are all high win rate decks. Choose it as your own discretion. 61%. So this is kind of the salt of the earth. It's your Explorer standard. Add a card here and there. So like the other formats, you have Fable the Mirrorbreaker, Shieldred kind of mixed into there with like Thoughtseize. This version is also running Strangles. So you have a bunch of discards, 8 in total. The ability to play 8 discards is kind of offset because you have both, or all 3 in this case. You have Seasoned Pyromancer that can ditch the extra discards late to make you tokens. The card draw is really nice with Shieldred as well to gain you life. Fable the Mirrorbreaker lets you loot them late game, as well as Crucius that can basically let you discard them and transform it into a more playable card. There's a lot of utility in this because you can tear apart their hand early when you want them, and then late game just kind of replace it with something else. This is a Dreadhorde Arcanist version of the deck, so it lets you flashback spells from your graveyard. A lot of cheap spells here to deal with a whole bunch of stuff. Some Graveyard Hate Main, some Molten Impact with scalable damage. You also have a Fable Passage to enable Revolt of this particular deck. And then you also have just a bunch of utility and creature lands mixed into here. From there, we go to 5-color Reanimator, 57% win rate. So this is a Atraxa Reanimator deck. So some versions I've seen have been playing a copy or two of Griselbrand in here. It's kind of the get around the Shieldred draw, like where Griselbrand doesn't. Griselbrand needs to attack to gain you the life immediately. You don't have like Sneak and Show, for example, where they get, or Sneak Attack, where they get haste. Sneak and Show is Show and Tell and Sneak Attack. Legacy days. So it's kind of the value with that. Griselbrand is technically castable. This one's not really, outside of like some treasures. But the core of the deck, you're just kind of loot stuff into your graveyard. You have Priest of the Fell rights as well as Burial rights to bring back the Atraxa. And then you have like these powerful 3-drops in Crucius and Fable. You can loot the Blood token with Bloodtithe Harvester. So turn 2, you can go Priest. Turn 3, you can go Bloodtithe Harvester. And then cast Atraxa that same turn. Also, don't forget you can Thoughtseize yourself to get it out. A bunch of removal, Fragment Reality, Fatal Push, 5 discard spells, kind of all mixed into there. And then low-key kind of hiding out here, Phyrexian Scrapyard. It's just another discard outlet in your land base that you get some value there. So you could discard like the cards you want in the graveyard, making either like Burial rights cheaper, throw in your Atraxa, and then you can also just get into play a Soul of New Phyrexia, kind of cheat into play. Cool utility land there. You also have Jinganta Companion for this list. We then move to Izzet Wizards, which is adopting some copies of Snapcaster Mage in the main. So a lot of this core deck is the same, 59% win rate. It is a Wizard tribal deck that's looking like Spellslinger Burn. So you have like Wizard's Lightning, Static Discharge, Play with Fire as all your burn spells. You have some interaction in the form of like Fading Hope. Version's also playing Piece It Together as a way to just like cycle, but then on the 4th cast, you get to take an extra turn. You're able to get things into play and with haste with Reckless Charge. And then you have like the really buffed Symmetry Sage, which incidentally just making it 3 power and 3 toughness goes a long way. Gets around Stomp, Play with Fire, stuff like that. But this just increases the base power, makes you have really explosive, powerful attacks. And then you pair that with like Dreadhorde Arcanist that lets you flash back 2 and 3 mana spells. You also have Balmor as a way to get extra power. So this version's opting to go with a little bit more in the 2-drop slot with the Snapcaster Mage, and then shifting some of the card advantage into the 1-drop slot with like Piece Together over Expressive Iteration. Also lets you keep the land count low at 20 lands. We then move to, so there's 2 decks I wanted to show. I don't have stats for them right now. There's just, they haven't reached the 100 game cap. But these look like cool lists, so I'm going to share them nonetheless. So disclaimer, you craft at your own risk. It might be good, it might be bad. I can't say for sure, but they're cool lists. So this is a Mardu, yeah. We got black and white and red. Nahiri, so this has got a lot of things going. So it's a Retrofitter Foundry package, artifacts with Yotai. You got Goblin Engineer that lets you search for an artifact and then put into the graveyard. So you can tutor for Parhelion. You have the Greasefang Parhelion combo with like Sky Sovereign. You have Trash for Treasures to cheat into play stuff. And you have a lot of ways to loot. Like Nahiri can also bring back creatures, so you have ways to like get back Greasefang, get back Crucius. So a lot of cool like things in here, a lot of different angles. Like how many different combos can we fit in a deck that's also still has some synergy? Get to see Fireblade Arms in action, so kind of a cool list here. And then lastly, Grixis Dredge. Again, don't know how good it is, but it's sweet looking. So this is a deck. This is Grixis Phoenix and Dredge mixed in together. So it's a self-mill deck. So you have things like Glimpse the Unthinkable that's traditionally played in a mill deck. You mill your opponent. Well, in this game deck, you want to mill yourself. So you put into the deck like Phoenixes, Prize Amalgams. You mill over Creeping Chills. So when it's put into your graveyard, you may exile if you do. So I don't think that counts as a cast because it doesn't say cast. It's just placed into exile instead. And it gives you kind of the alternative there. But you're basically self-milling. When you get Phoenixes back, you also could get back Prize Amalgams, as well as Necromebas as well, that if you mill them over, they go into your yard. Lots of ways to put things into the graveyard with a lot of looting effects, a lot of cheap spells, burn, otherworldly gaze. Just cool deck, all things considered. 18 lander as well. So that's it for the week. Doggo's saying, I want to go for a walk, so I am going to comply. I hope you have a great one. And if you have any cool, like, spicy lists, drop them in the comments as well. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.